distinguished guests for the evening. We shall be looking into how people's power could be institutionalized in the Constitution.
No, Loren, the recent popular uprising did not complete the realization of genuine popular democracy in our country. In fact, it merely initiated it. So tonight here at Street Pulse, we shall be looking into the various approaches or devices by which government, the Constitutional Commission, and the various cause-oriented groups will be trying to institutionalize and harness constructively this phenomenon of people's power.
And of course, which everyone is aware of what and how much the power of the people could do, especially in the EDSA revolution, in changing the government in this country. And through our discussions for the evening, we shall be looking on how this people power could be harnessed and used in the future.
At this point, Lorraine, it would be good to look back at history and find out how this people's power was brought to the fore.
Let's take a look.
Benigno Aquino's assassination in 1983 served as the catalyst to move the Filipino people into action against a fellow Filipino and his minions. After Ninoy's death, the people poured into the streets, more organized and as one against the dictator. The snap election of 1986 was the chance to express the desire of the people to change the administration. While the ruling party employed intimidation and, on occasion, violence to thwart the people's choice, the Filipinos did not budge from their vigilance and steadfastness in guarding the ballot.
I hereby proclaim Ferdinand E. Marcos as the duly elected president.
This time, the people refused to follow the dictator's script. Angered by the manipulation of election results and the subsequent proclamation of the then incumbent as re-elected president, the people resorted to civil disobedience that threatened the stability of the nation. Then came the February Revolution, an unprecedented move in social history. The tyrant was toppled, and with him a government that to many was so repressive the citizens just had to move as one to change it. People power came into being. By popular acclaim, Corazon C. Aquino was installed as the new president. In her was put all the hopes and dreams for a truly better Filipino society. Cory Aquino issued Proclamation Number 3, the Freedom Constitution, which to some endangered democracy. Shortly after, the president created the Constitutional Commission to draft a new constitution. Members of the commission were appointed, and such appointment reinforced the new opposition's contention that democracy was dying. But the Aquino government, with firmness, paid no heed to the objections to the manner of convening the commission and the choice of its members. On June 2, 1986, the CONCOM began its task of writing a new constitution. But how can the people who worked for the revolution now have a hand in the new constitution? Initially, the answer would be through public hearings. From June 21 to July 13, various regional sites were designated venues for consultations with the people. Assigned as convening groups were people's organizations like the NANFREL, Bayan, Lakas ng Sambayanan, and the JCs. Commissioners of the CONCOM were fielded throughout the archipelago to listen to what the people had to say after the issues were presented to them.
Kay parliamentary yan, kay presidential yan, pag mayroong diktador na sinuportahan ng armed forces, ay talagang maaaring yan.
While those who attended the public hearings looked like ordinary folk, they were members of different cause-oriented groups and sectoral organizations, and they proved to be articulate and fired with conviction about their wants and beliefs.
Sino ang may-ari yan? Yung mga tindagan, mga private. Taiwan. Yan ang dapat. Yan ang dapat.
The effectivity of these public hearings will be put to a test when the draft of the new constitution is presented to the people for ratification. If, indeed, the voice of the people shall have been heard by then, and the constitution is ratified by the citizens of this country, it can be said that the power of the people has come of age.
Before my colleague here, Butch, introduces our guest for the evening, we'd like to remind you, dear televiewers, that you can phone in your questions on our topic for the evening, the institutionalization of people's power in the Constitution. Our phone numbers are 993733 and 977669. Butch.
Tonight to share with us their insights on this topic, we have Minister Aquilino Pimentel Jr., who is no stranger to media, but who, since he was appointed Minister of Local Government, has received a lot more media coverage or exposure than he probably would have thought he would. Also with us tonight is former Labor Minister Blas Ople, who is a member of the opposition bloc in the Constitutional Commission and currently chairman of the Partido Nacionalista ng Pilipinas. And we also have with us Professor Edmundo Garcia, a professor of political science at the Ateneo and UP, and who's also a commissioner of the Constitutional Commission and chairman of the subcommittee on public hearings. And finally, representing the cause-oriented groups, we have Mr. Baltasar Pinguel, who was formerly, during the martial law period, the spokesperson of the Kabataang Kabayan, and right now, director of Popular Struggles Commission of Bayan. Yeah.
Good evening, gentlemen. Before we proceed with the discussion for the evening, we'd like to listen to what some of the people have to say about the CONCOM. Butch here, together with the production crew of Street Pulse, went to Calamba, Laguna to observe the proceedings of a public hearing. Let's take a look now.
Laguna upang kapanayamin ang ilan sa mga kinatawan ng mga magsasaka, estudyante at manggagawa hinggil sa pagbubuo ng bagong saligang batas. Ang bayan po ng Calamba, Laguna ay isang magandang larawan ng isang bayang nabuhay sa pagsasaka at ngayon unti-unting nilalamon ng industriyang pangkabuhayan. Atin pong pakinggan ang ilan sa mga mamamayan ng Laguna.
Kami po yung naniniwala na ang mga commissioner sa Constitutional Commission ay tulad ng isang karpintero na sila ang gagawa ng saligang batas o sila ang gagawa ng bahay, ngunit hindi sila ang may-ari ng kahoy. Ang may-ari ng kahoy ay ang sambuong sambayanan. Sa aming mga magsasaka, sanay na kami sa mga ganitong pag-uusap. Kung totohanin man nila o hindi, masigla kaming nakikilahok.
Nakikita namin na wala yung constitution para sa mga mangingisda, no? Pero nandito pa rin kami para sa ganun ay mailahad namin yung mga sentimiento ng mga maliliit na mga mangingisda na naiepektuhan sila. Bali ang nakikita natin dyan at konkretong karaingan o sentimiento ng mga maliliit na mga mangingisda ay alasin itong mga malalaking fish pen na nakakasagabal ito sa pamamalakaya ng mga maliliit na mangingisda.
Sa pinang pag-aari ng mga property, ito ay dapat maging magkaroon ng equitable distribution in terms of property at sa usapin ng wealth, para magkaroon ng social justice. Kung talaga mapapakinggan yung mga manggagawa sa pamagitan ng mga public hearings na ito, ay makakagawa ng isang magandang saligang batas.
Some of the people think of the public hearings and how it could be a venue for political expression. Perhaps we could have our discussion rolling by addressing the first question to Professor Ed Garcia, who, as we all know, is a political scientist and was based in South America during the martial law period for nearly a decade. Ed, the principle of people's participation in government was brought to focus during the EDSA revolution. And what do you think, what factors contributed to the success of this very unique political expression?
Well, by December 1985, we could say that the old order was dying and the new was struggling to be born. And the battle cry of people, if you remember, was sobra na, tama na, palitan na. On the one hand, people were very poor. 71% of our people were living below the poverty threshold. Just over 50% were eating below the food threshold. People were being repressed. Over 70,000 were jailed. Salvagings, there were perhaps over 1,000 during 85 alone. Disappearances. There was foreign intervention in our land. In other words, people were poor, there was no justice, and there was intervention. On the other hand, the government had lost its authority, its credibility, its legitimacy. In fact, for me, the symbolic action here was the post-electoral statement of the bishops when they said that there was no longer any moral basis for the Marcos government. And because of this, and the death of Ninoy, which in a sense unleashed the collective courage of our people, then the people's organizations, who in fact had been fighting for many, many years, they had come together with new forces who wanted now to bring about change for something different, for something better. And so they came together and fought to the very end until the dictatorship fell, until there was some kind of a chance for a better life.
So all these outside forces, you're trying to say, brought about this unique political expression in the through this people power phenomenon in the EDSA last February. But you were trying to say that the people power has been here for a long, long time already. So why couldn't we bring about such a change earlier?
Well, as I said, it was coming to a head. I think the critical threshold was reached when the government no longer had any credibility, authority, nor legitimacy, when the church and even sectors of the business and the military even refused to obey, in a sense, commands that they no longer felt came from a legitimate authority. And so people said, sobra na, tama na, palitan na ito.
So I'd like to ask Bah here, because he's been with the, I think, political movement since the 60s, and I guess that question also strikes me, how come this phenomenon came to fore only in the February Revolution, and why not before, when there were even times when the call for change was even more intense and severe than February?
Yeah. Well, I think it can be answered this way, no? We must look at the liberation of the people as a process. Siguro, ang nangyari nung pre-martial law period, that was the initial stages, and we were working with the objective condition existing at that time. Pero sinasabi nating critical na situation wherein, for instance, the government or the state under the leadership of Marcos can no longer rule the old way. Diyan ay makikita natin critical juncture na kung saan naging mahalagang factor ang people's power. So nakita natin na isa sa mga nakatulong dito was none other than the snap election, especially when it was perceived by the people that the reinstatement of Marcos was because of massive fraud and terrorism that characterized the snap election. nakita ng mga tao sa ganyang sitwasyon, ano, na hindi na mapapayagan ang mga pangyayaring tulad noon. Kaya nagkaroon ng desisyon ng mamamayan to abandon electoral struggle and to opt for a more militant form of disposing this dictatorship, and that was none other than the People's Power Revolution that took place noong February 22 to 25.
You just mentioned ba na importante ng mahalaga yung nangyari sa snap election.
Yes.
But the stand of Bayan, I remember, was boycott.
Yes,
Would you say then that with the success of the EDSA revolution, that the stand of boycott of Bayan to boycott the elections was a mistake?
Well, ganun talaga ginawa ng bayan, no? Actually, days after the installment of Mrs. Cory Aquino as president, we have this National Council meeting by Bayan. At doon sa National Council meeting ng Bayan, that was around the second week of March, we came out with our official assessment regarding the boycott campaign. At nagsagawa kami ng pronouncement na tactical error ang naganap sa boycott. Kaso lamang, ang ginagawa namin dito, referring to the February days, bagamat ang nangyari for Bayan during the election was to boycott with the intention of exposing and opposing Marcos, no? Pero ang naganap right after the election, nung nakita ng mamamayan, ay nagtutungo sa lansangan at may kahandaan na makipaglaban beyond electoral struggle. Nandoon ang bagong alyansang makabayan na kasama ng mga mamamayan na nag-exercise ng people's power.
Commissioner Ople, being a former labor minister of the previous administration, you were, I'm sure, in close touch with the labor sector and with the grassroots level. Didn't you feel the pulse of the people, and didn't it come to a time when you realized that people would say, tama na, sobra na? Was there any time in your political career serving the previous administration that you felt that way?
Well, for those of us who were then in the government and exercising political tasks, yes, there was an awareness of a gradual turning. At the time, of course, I was in Washington.
Yes.
As special envoy of the government of President Marcos. So I had my own balcony view of the revolution through television in the United States. But indeed, people's power was decisive in that February revolution. However, it was not sufficient. There had to be an internal crisis in the Marcos government. A wing of the military establishment had to revolt against President Marcos, which is one way of saying that in addition to people's power, we should recognize the decisive role of the reformist military at the time. And I think just to add some perspective, before people's power could attain that critical mass that it did, there had to be a prior democratic space in which they could organize and function. And that space was assured by the Marcos government to a degree that the snap election was called, and that was when the die was cast, which meant there was no possibility of recanting that moment in history. It had to go on. And that was the decisive moment when it did occur on election.
Ed, you have a smile on your face. Do you want to say something about what the commissioner just said?
Well, first of all, I disagree that there was democratic space. There was repressive space. For many of us who were in the streets, for many of us who were facing the riot police, the military in many parts of the country, there was a lot of repression. So I would like to say that I do not agree that there was democratic space during that period. And in fact, I think it was the collective courage unleashed by the sacrifice of Ninoy which brought people in massive numbers. And secondly, later on, it was the collective faith of a people which were not daunted by the tanks and so on, and said, all right, we are going to come together, we are going to face and dare and risk, and people overcome.
Minister Pimentel, would you agree that it was people power that brought down the Marcos administration, or was it also because there was a crack in the administration, and along with people power that brought it to its total collapse?
Well, I suppose a combination of several circumstances really brought down the Marcos regime. And I'd like to add that long before the death of Ninoy, people in Mindanao had begun a long struggle against the Marcos regime. And this is not to say that therefore the death of Ninoy was meaningless. No, I'm only trying to point out that before his death, there have been several incidents that finally led, in fact, to the, the outburst, let us say, of people power, triggered primarily by the death of Ninoy also. No? Now, in our own little experience in Cagayan de Oro, when I was out as mayor, it was the people who took to the streets that practically compelled Mr. Marcos to reinstate me. And there were several incidents also where the people of Mindanao demonstrated the power that no one can really resist if it is harnessed to the full.
Recently, we had this furor about the drama at the Manila Hotel, and people there are shouting that they were also exercising people's power, and they were proclaiming their own president. Ed, how different is this situation from what happened in February, and what led it to its total failure, and the eventual people just gave it up, and people didn't mind them?
Well, first of all, I believe that there was no popular support. Secondly, there is no just cause. I mean, they were looking for, it was a group of people in search of a cause, really. Democracy? Is it for a change of, is it for sovereignty? I mean, it was a group of people, a motley crowd, in search of a cause. At the same time, in search of a following. Unlike the February Revolution, which was, they wanted to put an end to dictatorship. It was very clear. They wanted to bring about a better life. And these are still the aspirations, the hope. That's why I say it is unfinished, essentially, the February Revolution. But what the people tried to do in Manila Hotel, what is known as the coup d'hotel, it is without direction. It is looking back, not looking forward.
Okay, we shall continue with this discussion on the phenomenon of people power after some reminders. We'll be right back.
35 Constitution was Delegate Tomas Cabili of Lanao. He had fought for the direct popular election of Mindanao legislators, and when the provision on this was amended, he believed that the right to suffrage of his constituents had been withheld.
Well, this promises to be another very heated discussion this evening on the phenomenon of people power. As early as now, we're getting this phoned-in questions already. Anyway, we'd like to remind you can phone in your questions at 993-733 and 977669. Before we took a break, we were discussing about the February Revolution and its comparison to what occurred at the Manila Hotel. Minister Opus, since most of these people who participated in the failed coup d'etat in Manila Hotel, could you comment on that event, and would you consider that an attempt at people power?
Well, it is undoubtedly a species of people power, if you consider that the generic term. The difference, of course, is that this protest movement, this version of people's power, has not focused on very clear principles and directions. To some extent, Ed is right. They are looking for a symbol for their assorted grievances, and Marcos just happens to be the available symbol. It must be taken, however, as a serious symptom, because many of the people who went there were actually governors and mayors that were replaced by Minister Pimentel, and members of the civil service who lost their security of tenure and who are therefore in the streets. This is a symptom, and I think anybody who wants to exploit discontent ought to go beyond the symbol of Mr. Marcos and tap the wider and deeper sources of real discontent all over the land. We are a developing country with possibly the highest expectations in our part of the world. President Aquino and her government, especially Minister Pimentel, are now beginning to feel the pressure of meeting expectations too high for our means and capabilities as a poor country.
I'd like to pursue that reference to Minister Pimentel here, no, regarding the displaced mayors and vice mayors. Nene, maraming talagang nagtatanong, no? Especially nung matapos yung revolusyon, inaasahan talaga ng mga tao na sa patakbo ng pamahalaan, talagang dapat sila ay makonsulta. No? Ngayon nagtataka sila bakit dito sa paghirang ng mga opisyal na panglokal, mukha yatang kulang yata o wala yatang konsultasyon. No? Meron nga ba at bakit medyo may kabuluhan ang nangyayari sa mga OICs natin?
Merong konsultasyon. Ang problema, the consultations cannot be as intensive as people would want the consultations to be. As a matter of fact, mga rekomendasyon ay kinukuha mula sa iba't ibang sektor ng ating bayan. At in some instances, nabigyan din ng pagkakataon yun at binigyan ng bisa yung mga rekomendasyon. Pero, siyempre, ito naman ang mga OICs ay very highly political jobs. And therefore, the jobs are highly contested also. Kaya, bigyan mo ng appointment ng isang OIC, 10 ang nadi-disappoint. And 10 others, and maybe 100 others to vote. No? Kaya lang, we have to do it. Tingnan mo lang nangyari doon sa Manila Hotel. Kung hindi napalitan yung mga OICs, sa OICs, ang mga incumbents sa Metro Manila, you can just imagine the mobilization that they could have, done using government power and government resources and government money to back up the Tolentino
What do you
caper.
say about this?
Sandali lang.
Buti Hotel.
Meron lang akong dadagdag.
There were no OICs in the first place.
Itong point nito, because meron lang akong dadagdag.
There were no OICs in the first place.
Itong point nito, because apparently some people do not quite realize the nature of the Aquino government. As a political scientist mentioned to me, there's a blurring of vision as to the exact nature of the Aquino government. First, people think that it is a normal government that came to power via elections, etc. And yet, it is also a transitory one. Now, kung normal ang gobyerno, naturally, the expectations are high for the delivery of services. But you have to also remember that the Aquino government is a transitory government, meaning to say we are transiting from a dictatorial and repressive regime to one that is a democratic and a non-authoritarian government. Therefore, as a transitory government, we have to dismantle all the vestiges of the Marcos government.
This is the main reason why you had to replace all, or not make it a case-to-case basis, all elective officials.
Not even all, but the more visible symbols of the Marcos government, especially those who committed fraud and terrorism against our people.
Would there
That's
have
the
been...
view from the government then. I'd like to ask Val here, ano bang tingin ng cost-oriented groups dito sa issue ng OIC or nakikialam ba kayo dito?
Yes, definitely, At unang-una, kami ay isang-ayon doon sa pagtanggal talaga ng mga OICs, lalo na yung galing doon sa ruling party ng Marcos regime, noong itong mga KBL. In fact, if I were to make some criticism regarding the Aquino government, ang isang nakita kong criticism ay sapagkat naging mabagal ang pagtanggal dito sa mga KBL nito.
Mabagal
Sapagkat
pa
dapat
yun.
nating malaman, mabagal, Mabagal in the sense na ang pag-install kay Cory ay sa pamamagitan ng isang revolutionary struggle ng mamamayan. And therefore, kakaiba yung proseso ng paglagay sa kanya, she might as well have done things like, for instance, replacing this bureaucracy na kontrolado ng KBL sapagkat kinakailangan nating maitayo ang isang pamahalaang matibay na wala ng posibilidad na bumalik ang kasamaan na nilikha ni Marcos. And this can be done through unang-una pag-revamp ng civilian bureaucracy sa pamagitan ng pag-appoint ng mga tao na proven and tested at galing sa hanay ng opposition. And secondly, revamp din ang military because these are the two aspects of the state that
We are talking of governors and mayors and members of the legislature duly elected by the people. One of those elected, although contested in the Supreme Court,
Yes, pero
was
alam
the election of the former Member of Parliament from Misamis Oriental. There were 56 members of the opposition elected in 1984, and Minister Pimentel was one of them. He didn't mind the abolition of the elected legislature because he knew he was going to be a member of the cabinet. It took some time before the remainder of the 56 were becomingly accommodated in the hierarchy of the Aquino government. And the latest to be accommodated was my friend and your friend, MP Humubono Atasa.
I suppose in the manner that you were accommodated in the CONCOM, that's why you're not so
Well, you know, it promises a very
over
interesting
the,
topic, but
abolition.
we do not want our discussions to be derailed. We are talking about the phenomenon of people power, and I'd like to go back to Minister Pimentel here, no? It seems that a lot of some sectors believe that what the Ministry of Local Governments and Community Development has been doing is just replacing elected officials and replacing them with OICs. We'd like to know whether, since the local government should be closely in touch with the grassroots level, where ultimately people power originates and emanates from, what are your projects and plans from the grassroots level, since you're in charge of local governments and community development?
First and foremost, Lauren, let me stress that there are two premises for the replacement of the incumbents by the OICs. First is the legal premise, and the second is the political premise. Legally, ang punto namin ay tapos na ang term ng mga local government officials by March 2nd, 1986, since they were elected to a 6-year term and they assumed on March 3, 1980. 6 years thereafter is March 2nd, 1986. So by that time, wala na silang legal hold to stay in office. So anyway, tapos na yung legality na yun. Maraming asuntong inabla ko doon sa Korte Suprema, both in the Supreme Court of Marcos and in the Supreme Court of Mrs. Aquino. Both Supreme Courts upheld the right of the ministry to replace the incumbents with OICs. Then, second thing, the political premise. The political premise is that kailangan mapalitan yung mga KBL incumbents, because how else will you see the implementation of the programs and policies of Mrs. Aquino down to the lowest levels? Kaya, talking about programs, anong ginagawa ngayon? We are supporting the countryside development effort of Mrs. Aquino, meaning to say, we are putting in roads wherever feasible, water systems, and cooperative farms in many areas of the country. And these are some of the things that we are trying to do in the Ministry of Local Government.
Well, I think Commissioner Ople has a comment on that, but we'd like to take a short break right now. We'll be right back.
The oldest delegate to the 1934-35 Constitutional Convention at 74 was Teodoro Sandico. The youngest was 24-year-old Wenceslao Vincents. In the 1986 CONCOM, the youngest member is Chito Gascon at 22, while the oldest at 83 is former Chief Justice Roberto Concepcion.
On the phenomenon of people power, and before we took a break, Minister Pimentel was remarking about the presence of Commissioner Ople in the CONCOM. You'd have a reaction to that?
Well, yes, it is a privilege for me and 3 other colleagues from the opposition to accept the offer of several seats in the Constitutional Commission for the opposition, above all, so that we can help. The objective of abbreviating this awkward transition period that Nene earlier had called a transitory period. It is inherently unstable. We must accelerate the return to full constitutional government with the approval of a constitution and the subsequent holding of the local and the national elections. That will complete the cycle of stability. Now, why are we in the CONCOM on behalf of the opposition? There are 3 streams of opposition thought now. The first would destabilize the Aquino government. The second would depend on a quick route of return to power through a coup d'etat. The third would be to oust the Aquino regime through constitutional and legal means. I would not mention which parties represent the first 2. But my party represents the third. Okay. It is the constitutional option for ousting the Aquino government through elections. And that is the reason we want a constitution as soon as possible, a covenant between the people and those who govern them, so that we can proceed immediately to the first local and national elections.
Now,
You'll
talking
be disappointed. You'll be disappointed.
I hate
Okay.
to, you know,
Talking about
Lorraine, I hate to draw the
Yeah.
discussion away from this hot issue of OIC, but I guess our main topic tonight is to discuss the institutionalization of people's power.
Yes, I
So
would
I'd like to try my question at Ed Garcia. Ed, katapos lang ng series of public hearings, no? Ano ba ang naging resulta ng mga public hearings? Alam ko, maikli ang panahon, tsaka ilan lang probinsya ang nasaklaw ninyo. No? Ano ba, meron ba talagang mangyayari dun sa public hearings? Mapapaabot ba yung mga sinabi ng tao dun sa Constitutional Commission? At sasalamin ba yan sa ligang batas?
Oh, sa aking palagay, mahalaga yung mga sinabi ng mga tao sa iba't ibang lugar. Nagpunta kami sa 49 na lugar, 24 of those sa Luzon, 12 sa Visayas, at saka 13 sa Mindanao. And para sa akin, mahalaga yung nangyari sa public hearings. For the first time, I really saw people discussing issues, principles, program. Ang pinag-uusapan, hindi lamang mga kandidato, hindi lamang mga personalities o kaya yung patronage. For the first time, people were discussing programs. Pinag-uusapan nila land reform. Pinag-uusapan nila tungkol sa bases. Pinag-uusapan nila tungkol sa death penalty. Ang dami mga bagay o form of government. And so, para sa akin, mahalaga yung nangyari. At masasabi ko na yung mga sinabi nila tungkol sa demokrasya o paano natin ipagtatanggol ang ating mga karapatan ng mamamayan. Yan, yung mga sinabi nila tungkol yan, mailalagay yan kamukha ng system of initiative and referendum. Ikalawa, tungkol sa mga sinabi nila sa social justice. In fact, magkakaroon ng isang artikulo tungkol lamang sa social justice. Magkakaroon ng isang artikulo tungkol sa land reform, tungkol sa labor rights, tungkol sa people's organization, tungkol sa urban poor, sa fishermen, cultural minorities, women. And we have heard many people, pinakinggan namin ang mga tao, ano sinasabi nila. At yan, ang sinasabi nila, mailalagay ang karamihan ng mga hinihiling. At panghuli, nationalism. Yung pang isang talagang matinding parang sigaw ng sambayanan na kailangan magkaroon tayo ng isang bayan para sa Pilipino. Kamukha ng issue ng bases. For the first time, I really heard people discussing very passionately the issue of bases. And I can tell you, in the 6 places I was in, the great clamor is for the end, the termination of the basis agreement by 1991.
Nabanggit mo Ed, yung this mechanisms katulad ng initiative, referendum, recall. Ano ba ibig sabihin nito mga to? Ang alam ko, these are pamamaraan to for direct intervention in governance. How do you propose to implement this in the Congress?
Itong sistema ng initiative at saka referendum, kapag ang mga tao sa isang lugar, inanais sila magpresenta ng isang bagong batas, kung ang 10% halimbawa ng nakatira doon sa lugar na yon, nais silang lumagda upang ipresenta ang isang batas, maaari na yon na pumasok yan sa legislatura sa pamamagitan ng mga signatures ng taong bayan.
What about the call of elected officials? Do you think that we as a Filipino people would have the political maturity for this? Won't this measure be used to destabilize the government by the opposition or enemies of the state of the country?
Well, actually, this is a principle that is still being studied and will be debated on the floor, I'm sure, within the coming days. But it is a system which, in a sense, tries to institutionalize people's power. If it's really the desire of people for them to question the accomplishment, the achievement of a public official, and they think it is questionable, then they can present sufficient signatures, and by that method, process, be able to be called.
So kung may kaaway ang isang official dyan, they can just gather and get organized and work for the recall of that elected official.
Siguro rin, magandang tanongin natin si Val dahil and si Minister siguro, hindi kaya ito kasi this implies a certain degree of political maturity and organization, but do you feel, sa palagay mo ba, yung tao ngayon ganun nakamulat at ganun naka-organisado, para naman itong mga pamamaraan na ito, hindi naman gamitin ng ibang grupo, whether ideological o mga warlords, para naman biguin yung kagustuhan ng mamamayan?
Yan naman ang may pagpapasalamat natin doon sa February Revolution, sapagkat isa sa mga pinakamahalagang resulta nito ay walang iba kung hindi ang pagtaas ng pampulitikang kamulatan ng mamayan. Halimbawa, kung ihahambing natin ang political consciousness ng mga Pilipino ngayon kaysa ng mga Pilipino nakaraan, ay masasabi natin mataas ang kanilang kamulukan. Kaya sa ganitong mga mekanismo, tulad halimbawa ng initiative, referendum, recall at iba pa, ay handa ang ating mga mamayan. And incidentally, halimbawa, para sa bayan, no, sa aming organisasyon, ang isa sa aming proposal sa form of government ay tinatawag na People's Congresses, na kung saan ang mga kinatawan ng mamamayan ay halal, no, from the barrio level na para sa barrio congress, the barrio congress to elect the municipal congress, etc. etc. At ibinabatres o sinusuportahan ang ganitong konsepto sa pamamagitan ng itong system of initiative, recalls, and referenda.
Nene, kasi kabisado mo rin itong topic na to dahil sa local government, you deal with the grassroots, no? Do you share the same, ganun din ba ang pakiramdam mo sa sinabi ni
sinusuportahan ko yung paninindigan ni Bal because after all, kahit hindi pa gaanong sabihin natin fully mature politically ang mga taong bayan, we have to aspire to that ideal. And people are entitled to make their own mistakes. Ibig sabihin na, how does a child learn to walk if he does not walk at all? Of course, matutumba pang minsan-minsan, but that will help him become mature and strong. So I support the move for this kind of initiative.
At this point, we'd like to give our viewers a chance to ask a question through the phoned-in questions. Here's a question for Commissioner Ople. Supposing Marcos succeeds in his plan, what will former Minister Ople be doing? Name withheld.
I'm trying to divine the meaning of this question. Does it presume that President Marcos has succeeded in returning to the Philippines and has resumed power? I would not expect to be in his cabinet. There is a greater probability that I will continue to lead an opposition party.
Still the PNP?
Yes.
We have a question here addressed to Mr. Nene here, no? The military's role was the one which made the February Revolution successful. Please comment on this.
Hindi naman siguro totoo yan. Ang nangyari, the military hastened the collapse of the Marcos regime. With the reformists withdrawing their support for Marcos, mas madali ang pagkatumba ni Marcos. Pero kung tingnan natin ang nangyari noong Pebrero, nakikita naman natin that it was the people who prevented the massacre of the reformists in Camp Aguinaldo and Camp Crame. Kung hindi pa ang mga milyon-milyon na mga civilian na nagpalibot or who surrounded Camps Crame and Aguinaldo, I am sure that their push or their coup would not have succeeded at all.
I have another question here for Commissioner Ople. What are your reasons for wanting to replace the Aquino government? That's from George Ernesto.
Well, the Aquino government apparently is serving its turn, and it must stand the test of a challenge from the opposition parties. Otherwise, it will be in danger of lapsing into a complacent and perhaps an indifferent government.
When you say in danger, would that mean that there's another possibility of people power again trying to overthrow the present administration?
It is difficult to foresee the future, especially in the medium term. But of course, our people expect a lot from the Aquino government. Most of these hopes and expectations will not be met. And so the process of socializing resentments into people's power cannot be discounted at this time. Of course, as a loyal Filipino, I hope that they will succeed in coping with these Herculean tasks, beginning with the Ministry of Local Government.
Let me assure you, Lorraine,
But
that
our role, as we see it, is to challenge the Aquino government, so that it will be more dynamic, and so that it will be more responsive. That is
So the
our role.
PNP is there as a watchdog of the Aquino government?
Yes, to fiscalize.
I think Nene has
I'd like to assure Lorraine and our audience here that the Aquino government is not in any danger at all of being replaced by the PNP of Mr. Ople.
There's another question addressed to Ed Garcia, no? Sabi dito, Ed Garcia, the public hearing, pinakita na overwhelming consensus for the termination of the basis agreement. No? Now, can you now assure the people that in the CONCOM will heed the people's clamor?
Well, yesterday in the committee of the preamble and the declaration of principles, we were able to, by a vote of 6-2, a draft resolution is now on the will now be on the floor. Number 1, declaring movement towards neutrality in cooperation with other nations in the region. Secondly, also a declaration that we will be a nuclear weapons-free Philippines. And thirdly, that we are respecting the treaty agreements to have to terminate the basis agreement by 1991. But of course, this will not be in the plenary session. So we will depend now on the whole body to take a vote on this very critical issue.
We'll have more answers to your phone-in questions after some reminders. We still have time for something.
About it. But there is nothing wrong in making it explicit.
I'd like to ask, sa labas naman ng CONCOM, no, what are the political movements doing to make sure that this political people's power is harnessed and constructively used? Programa dito.
Actually, ang may mga ginagawang mga court-oriented organizations, no? Halimbawa tulad ng bayan, pero it has something to do also with the Constitutional Commission. Dahil nasa alam natin na sa ngayon ito ay may katungkulan na magbalangkas ng saligang batas ng ating bansa. At isa sa mga halagang bagay na dapat ma-institutionalize ay ang people's power. Meron kami mungkahi na nakuha ito sa aming mga conferences ng suggestion sa isang forma ng pamahalaan. And we are suggesting na maging forma ay hindi na tulad ng mga naganap pa, no? Yung presidential or parliamentary or whatever. Ang mas binibigyan namin ng diin ay ang pagtatakda ng people's congresses. Paghahalal nito mula sa level ng baryo, paghahalal sa level ng municipality, sa district, hanggang sa kataas-taasan. Sapagkat ang isang bagay na may iwasan nito, yung naging evil ng ating political system, na ang politika ng bansa ay dinodomina ng mga tao na gagaling sa mga nakakiriwasa. It is about time that the people coming from the ranks of the masses, specifically the peasant and the workers, should be given a say. And I think this is the best form of government wherein their initiatives can be expressed freely.
And I heard that there's a provision in the in proposed constitution regarding the strengthening and promotion of people's organizations. Is there such a move going on right now?
Exactly. Right now, in the article on social justice, there is a special section which is on the role and rights of people's organizations. First of all, this encourages the formation of people's organizations all over the country. Fishermen, farmers, urban poor, ordinary housewives. Number 2, not just the formation of organizations, but for them to have a mechanism of consultation so that they can participate in decision-making which affect their lives. And finally, in this section, you also recognize that the Constitution, in a sense, is a piece of paper. Unless people act, unless they become co-authors of their own future, of their own destiny, that they mobilize to change things. Only in that sense will this Constitution come to life.
May we have a final statement from Minister Pimentel and clarify once and for all the controversy of the UIP? And well, anyway, these people who are protesting against you are exercising people power.
Right. Kaya nga, Loren, may dagdag ko lang dito sa sinasabi ng ating mga commissioners at Nibal, na kahit ano pang sabihin nila dyan sa Ligang Batas, ang importante, huwag silang maglagay ng hadlang o an obstacle to the right of the people to peacefully assemble, to express their grievances and seek, solutions to these grievances. Yun ang pinaka-importante para sa atin. And basta meron yung provision na yun, yung people power, you can exercise it. No? Kaya ang importante, huwag silang maglagay ng hadlang and make sure that even OICs should not be allowed to disallow the right of the people to peaceably assemble for a redress of their grievances. Yun ang pinaka-importante.
You actually welcome all these protests.
Of course, basta peaceful. Huwag lang gagamit ng puwersa. Huwag namang bubugin yung mga newsmen diyan at babatuhin yung mga innocent passers-by. Yun ang masasabi ko.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I would like to acknowledge all the people who called in to ask questions, but we're sorry. As usual, we don't have enough time. I would like to thank Attorney Valenzuela, Roberto, Jimmy Manhutok, no name, Vi Guevara, Mr. Abad, Eddie Ong, Albert Chua, Carlito Violago, Andrea Manila, George, a certain George, Dean Vega of Aquinas, Mr. Medina, Muhammad Abila, Attorney Domingo, Tony Estrada, Albert Chan, Eddie Ong, Carlito, Liza,
And more, marami pa dito. Si Mr. Orly Dalus, Nelson Deles, Mr. Malyari, Dina, and I guess that's all.
Well, we thank you very much for having joined us, dear viewers, and we'd like to thank our guests, Professor Ed Garcia, Commissioner Blas Ople, Bal Pingal of Bayan, and of course, Minister Aquilino Pimentel. In behalf of the staff of Street Pulse and Attorney Butch Abad here, we'd like to thank you for having joined us in Street Pulse. Join us next week as we discuss civilian supremacy over the military here in Street Pulse.
Thank you,
I'm Lauren
Andy.
Legada. Good night.
Thank you.
Pulse. In Street Pulse.
My co-host, Attorney Butch Abad. Hi,
Good
Butch.
evening, Lauren. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, this evening, Butch, we shall be discussing the issue of civilian supremacy over the military. And of course, this will entail reviewing the role of the military in past events. We shall be going all the way to the role of the military during the martial law regime and on to the EDSA revolution.
And on to the Manila Hotel incident. You know, the military, since the Philippine Constabulary was formed about 36 years ago, has been playing a very significant, increasing significant role in the affairs of government, especially during the past 14 years in the regime of the deposed President Marcos.
So this evening promises to be sparked with various views on the military, and anticipating this, We have invited our distinguished guests for the evening to shed light and to give us their perceptions on the role of the military.
Of course, we'd like to start the program with the VTR on the military, so let's watch this.
The ex-president prided himself as a bemedaled hero, a brave lieutenant who eventually became the commander-in-chief. When Marcos declared martial law, military power ruled the Philippines. For 14 years, the armed forces went beyond its task of protecting the country from external and internal aggression. Military officers occupied high positions in government offices as well as in semi-private corporations. Military involvement in the political scene came to a head when 26 officers and enlisted men were charged with conspiracy to assassinate Benigno Aquino Jr., the dictator's political arch-enemy. General Fabian Ver, General Prospero Olivas, and the others were subsequently acquitted.
You assume your duties as chief of staff immediately.
But this event, coupled by reports of atrocities and abuses committed by soldiers against civilians, the reputation of the military as an ally of the people hit its lowest ebb. In the 1986 revolution, change became possible when the military went against military. On the one hand was the group led by the so-called reformists, and on the other, those loyal to Marcos.
We request the civilians to leave the vicinity of Camp Kramet immediately, Mr. President. That's why I come here with your orders, so we can immediately strike them.
The military reformists forged a partnership with the people. Massed at strategic points during the revolution, millions of civilians acted as buffers to protect the 300 or so men in Camps Krame and Aguinaldo against possible retaliatory attacks by General Ver and his men. The ability of civilian human power to fend off steel-armed machines only dramatized civilian supremacy over the military. Under the Aquino government, the military regained the confidence of the Filipino people. Soldiers were now looked upon as true comrades, partners in rebuilding a pillaged nation.
Araw, pag tindipinisya lang ng mga sundalo, mananakit. Ngayon hindi.
Saka yung noon, matatapang mga military noon, dapat ang mga tao.
Sa palagay ko, baka mas nakatigalang ang military ngayon kaysa nung panahon ni Presidente Marcos.
But this growing trust was put to a test when an aborted coup led by former Senator Arturo Tolentino was staged at the Manila Hotel last July 6. A number of military men were said to have taken part in the attempt. They later claimed to have been misled into going to the hotel, believing that Defense Minister Juan Ponce Enrile called for them.
Ang para sa amin, balingbing siya. Kusumanib.
Enrile had joined Argentina during the Manila Hotel incident. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
With the claim that they rushed to the scene of the coup to stand by Enrile was the military expressing loyalty only to one man. Where was their commitment to the masses? Why was Minister Enrile quick to dismiss the incident? General Fidel Ramos, who sits on top of the military, required the involved military men to do a mere 30 push-ups. Was this all? President Aquino, who had initially ordered the arrest of those involved in the Manila Hotel incident, thereafter instructed the defense minister to offer clemency to the loyalist troops. happens to the newly recreated equal partnership of the civilian and the military? The answers should be provided not only in the light of the Manila Hotel incident, but also in the efforts of the present leadership to probe human rights violations during the Marcos era. Today's government walks a tightrope. Must it pay utang na loob to the military or the faction of the military which hastened the transfer of power? Or must it follow populist ideals?
Tonight's topic on Street Pulse, civilian supremacy over the military. Here's Butch Abad to give you or introduce to you our guest for the evening.
Thank you, Loren. Tonight, to share with us their views on this topic, we have Ms. Doris Nuval, who is better known as Doris Bafri, and is one of the longest-held political female political detainee, and is currently the head of the Public Affairs Program of the Channel 4 People's Television. We also have with us Professor Randolph David, who is the spokesperson of Lakas ng Sambayanan and vice chairperson of a new oriented group called the Bukluran para sa Ikasusulong ng Sosyalistang Isip at Gawa. Randy is also the director of Third World Studies Center. And on Randy's left is Brigadier General Samiano, who is the Chief Judge Advocate General of the Judge Advocate General's Office and a member of the Presidential Committee on Human Rights. And finally, we have Commissioner Rene Sarmiento, one of the younger commissioners in the Constitutional Commission. He's also a human rights lawyer connected with the Free Legal Assistance Group.
I was asking him a while ago from what sector he was from the CONCOM. He said from the youth. He'd like to think from the youth sector. No? And I'm glad that we have a female guest. The first time that we have a female guest on Street Pulse this evening. Yes, right. Well, we could start our discussion rolling by addressing the first question to Randy David here. As a political scientist, an observer of political events, Randy, maybe you could tell us who really reigns supreme in the present dispensation. Is it the military or a civilian government?
First of all, Lauren, I am not a political scientist. The Department of Political Science might complain. I am a sociologist.
Right, okay.
I think that it can safely be said that at this point in time, civilian authority is still supreme over the military. I think the important question, however, should be what is causing alarm in the hearts of our people so that we feel that there are certain tendencies within our present society which seem to think that the military should have a greater role or more than a military role in our society, despite the assurances from the defense minister and some sections of the military that they adhere to the doctrine that civilian authority should always be supreme over the military.
Randy, when you say that civilian authority is supreme over the military, is that the ideal or are we talking about the realities here?
I think that is the ideal.
We'd like to know, realistically speaking, considering the past events like the EDSA revolution and the Manila Hotel incident, taking into consideration the role that the military played, could we safely say and honestly, realistically speaking, say that the military is subservient to the civilian authority?
Yes, I think up to this point,
all honesty?
yes. In all honesty, the civilian authority is still supreme. However, I feel that while the military is not yet out to seize power, nevertheless, I believe that the military is angling a larger role for itself, or some sections of the military are angling a larger role for themselves in the present political order. I do not believe that while they think that they are capable of mounting a military coup, nevertheless, I think that they are not about to mount a coup.
I'd like to frame the question on the general because also be in a very appropriate position to answer the question. But yeah, I guess some analysts say that this fear results from attempts by the military to earn a position as an equal partner in the present Aquino coalition government. What do you have to say to that, General Soriano?
You mentioned about attempts. I'm not aware of any.
Mm-hmm.
And my perception is that the military is still an instrumentality of the state, which is wholly controlled and financed by the civilian authority. The control is exercised by the commander-in-chief, who is a civilian. And in the governmental setup, the Armed Forces of the Philippines is a bureau under the Defense Ministry, and at the helm of the ministry is a civilian, Minister Juan Ponce. Then the financial aspect, the financing of the Armed Forces of the Philippines is drawn from the appropriations which the legislature, the civilian entity, these appropriations go towards the maintenance and equipage of the armed forces, and to a large extent determines the size and shape of the armed forces.
Because she was in jail for about 5 years, no?
4.5
years, yeah. And you had a chance to observe the military inside the camp, and it's now after the revolution, and you're free. How do you relate to that the public's perception of the military right now compared to what it was before?
I think the public's very hopeful that the military has indeed changed, because it wasn't too long ago that they reigned supreme over everyone, and their word was law. As a detainee, I haven't seen any perceptible change. I will, of course, have the unique experience of having been in prison, so when I see fatigue uniforms, I still sort of back up.
Yeah, the trauma.
Yeah, it's still pretty traumatic. If you're asking about within the rank and file in the military, I think, which was your point, I think they're still as demoralized. I still have a chance to visit many people in Camp Crame, and I don't think the reforms as stipulated, as promised by the Chief of the Armed Forces have taken effect as of yet.
How does it feel to have your captors some of them still in the military?
Really weird. Would you like to fun? It's, see, when you're in prison, you have this, I don't know if this is common for all other political prisoners, but when you're robbed of every ounce of dignity you ever had and stripped of everything, the honor and everything, it's pretty hard to forgive, much more forget. I've lost track of what I was going to, but at any rate, I still find it very hard to just forget,
But I don't get, because he also had the chance to take the military as a human rights lawyer.
My answer to that question is yes. Number 3 clearly states that civilian authority is supreme over the military, and the freedom constitution, the provisional constitution, mandates the president to reorganize the government. That will include the military. It mandates the government, the president, to restore peace and order, to start insurgency, to national reconciliation. It mandates the president to implement measures to protect social, political, economic rights. In that, the freedom constitution, Article 7 of the Constitution, that Article 7 states that the president is the commander-in-chief and official is of the armed forces, and called the armed forces to maintain or to suppress lawless violence, rebellion, insurrection, and disturbances in the country. And another provision in the Freedom Constitution, which clearly shows that the president is supreme over the military, is that elected officials and even appointed officials shall continue in office provided by proclamation or executive order. That means the president has extraordinary powers over the officials, over the military.
Naturally, we would like to think that civilian authority is supreme over the Constitution on paper, it is so. But in recent events like the EDSA revolution, we all know that the success of the so-called revolution was highly dependent on the protection of Enrique General Ramos, and that that incident, people rushed, and the loyalists rushed, and the soldiers rushed, and they fought and leader while I was behind the coup d'etat. So we can see this goal, and I don't really totally agree that it's a civilian to reign supreme here.
I'll agree with you that the military military plays a crucial role in our society, but it's still the civilian authority which is supreme. Let me cite examples. Enrile pledged allegiance to the Republic of the Philippines, accepted his appointment as Minister of National Defense, and over again, in all his statements publicly, he said that he is subordinate to the Commander-in-Chief. He said that he will obey the orders of the President. And he said in one of his public statements that Marcos offered him to form a junta. Forget about Aquino. But he did not follow Marcos. So that shows that Enrile and other military officers recognize the supremacy of civilian authority.
I'd like to pursue the apprehension that was raised a while ago by Randy here. I remember you recently released a statement, and in that statement you warned about highlighting of this interest in military on the Marcos loyalists and forgetting the other threats that's emerging within the present government of Cory Aquino.
What is this threat, Butch?
Can you elaborate further on this?
Well,
And can you tell us who this, what you call the neo-fascist
Medyo mabigat yata yan, ha?
Ito yung neo-fascismo. Ayaw namin sabihin bagong fascismo, baka akalain nila ang tinutukoy dito si Mrs. Aquino. Hindi naman. Tinatawag na neo-fascismo to distinguish it from the fascism of Marcos. No? Kasi ang tunay na kahulugan ng fascismo sa Europa, ito hindi ng isang lipunan. Tingnan natin, sa lahat ng mga bansa kung saan nangibabaw ang militar, ang pangingibabaw ng military ay was accompanied by an analyst, a campaign that was launched supposedly to preserve society, which later on was to include everybody na hindi sumasang-ayon doon sa umiiral na kaisipan. That is why in Europe it included later on not only communists but also socialists, democrats, and even liberals. Ang ibig lang namin sabihin dito sa kanta ng neo-fascismo sa atin, nakikita natin nagkakaroon ng ugat, no? Ay yung intolerance for ideas agree with those who feel that the number one problem of our country is the threat of communist insurgency.
Sino ba yung grupo or element na tinutukoy niya rito?
I think it is very evident sa statement namin, it's quite clear, na yung gagalingan ng kaisipan ng fascismo ay hindi lamang yung mga loyalists na katulad halimbawa yung mga nagde-demonstrate sa Luneta, kung hindi na rin yung mga taong kamakailan lamang sumugod sa Channel 4, sinasabi nila na maglalabas ng mga programang kung saan tinatalakay ang mga kaisipang sosyalista at komunista dahil ito raw ay dangerous. No? Sa aking paningin, nothing can be more dangerous than a campaign against an idea that has not been understood. No? Why not allow all kinds of ideas, all kinds of perspectives to be debated in the open? Para kung sa gayon, kung talagang meron tayong dapat katakutan ng hilismo at komunismo, maliwanag yan at naiintindihan ng ating mga kababayan.
I'm sure our audience would like to react to what all your views and perceptions on the military, and I would like to remind them that they can call in their questions at 993733 and 9776669. And Butch and I went around Metro Manila the other day and tried to look into what the people think of the military and hear the interviews that we conducted. Sino ang mas nangahari sa ating society ngayon? Ang militar o tayong mga civilian?
Civilian na. Civilian.
Bakit mo nasabi yan?
Eh tayo, madali tayo ngayong magkaisa eh. Pag minsan tumawag ka ng may influence sa isang lugar, tumawag ka ng tao, madaling dumadalo.
Bago magrevolusyon, anong patingin mo sa militar?
Palagay ko, ang militar noong dating administrasyon, masyado silang abusado sa tao. No, sabi nila, mga militar daw abusado. Pero ngayon, sa pakiramdam ko, mas abusado ngayon ang militar.
Bakit yun nasabi yan?
Sa mga nababasa namin sa dyaryo, terminal lang may kasangkot na militar. Eh, ganun din naman noon. Pero ang pakiramdam ko, mas sahol pa ngayon.
Personally, there is still a lot of distrust within me, no, towards the military.
It's better now.
even before, when Marcos was still our president, the military, majority of the military were also for Cory na.
You know, as early as now, we have some comments from our guests, but at this point, I'd like to read a comment from Joseph Chuatoko that the military provided, was a catalyst actually, but it's people power that is paramount. The people acted only because they recognized the legitimacy of Cory Aquino's presidency. So he agreed, Joseph agreed, most of the views and perceptions of the...
I'd like to ask the General, no? One of the major causes of rift between the civilian and military elements within the Aquino government is the differential approach to the problem of insurgency. Like military minister Enrile would maintain that the counter-insurgency operations must continue, while guys like Joe Querador insist that the military solution is a failed Marcos strategy. So as a result, there seems to be no progress in the peace talks. Can you comment on this, General?
Actually, we started the premise on the assumption that there's a rift. I don't see any. These are views on the final analysis. The policy of the government will be dictated by the Commander-in-Chief, as she should, the President. This rift does not exist in my perception.
Well, whether there's a rift or not between the civilian authorities and the military, we should discuss that but a little bit further later on after we take a short break. We'll be right back. We're back on Street Pulse for a discussion on civilian supremacy over the military. At this point, we'd like to listen to more man-in-the-street interviews.
Have a peaceful solution to the problem. The best way to deal with this is really to bargain, to sit down on the table, no, and not to use guns and bullets on each other, no, because this seems to just make the problem worse, no. It just tends to destabilize our government even further, no?
The position of the military is clear. There is no way by which the communists can have even an informal or undeclared coalition with the government. But the perception of the civilian authority seems to be that the civilian authority needs the cooperation and influence of the leftists. We perceive the peace talk as no peace talk at all, and it is bound to fail.
Even before the revolutions, the Marines have adopt and implement this policy of reconciliations, and we implement social as well as military strategy.
In addition to that, so I think the military should be represented in this reconciliation program.
General Soriano, perhaps you'd like to react to some of the comments. You were saying something when Oliver Lozano was commenting on the role of the military.
Yes, I was saying that the provisional constitutional provisions cited by Rene here are not mere constitutional provisions, but they are a reality in our society.
In a certain interview several weeks ago, Minister Anita was quoted as saying that the military should not take sides. It should be non-political, in the sense that it should not side with Wheeler or Kay Wheeler or whatever political party. Is it possible to do that when the Chief of Staff is the President who belongs, of course, to a political party? Is it possible for the military to be non-political and...
I think it is a, what you might call it, an armed forces of the state, democratic state like ours, should be apolitical. And this is what Minister Enrile was stressing. In its operations, it should never be guided by political motives.
It has been characterized before that the military was more loyal to a person rather than to the masses of the people.
is there an omen or a possible indication right now that the same is happening right now, that the military is loyal to just one person like Minister Enrile rather than to the greater majority of the people?
No, this is not. We have operational plans which have not now reversed this tendency. I mean the tendency to be loyal to only one man. Here now, the role of the armed forces will be a protector of the people. And this would mean that their loyalty will be to the people, not to a single individual.
The past 14 years of martial law has greatly expanded the role of military in government affairs. We saw military people in business, in tribunals, in many spheres of government or activities, no? And I'm sure that's being carried on. I mean, they don't change that fact, no? I mean, this is being carried on even up to now.
No, I would stop you there because that thing is a thing of the past. It is a program of the armed forces now to reorient its activities. And whatever was done before could be considered deviations. We go back to our role as a protector of the people and as implementers of national policy as regards national security and peace and order.
You have a comment on that?
I mentioned a while ago that the civilian authority is supreme over the military, but we must recognize that there are realities that could possibly affect or erode this principle. For instance, the size of the armed forces of the Philippines. We have at present 270 members of the armed forces. Second, big military budget. In 1972, the budget of the military was only 600 million pesos. But in 1986, it rose to 11 billion pesos, 17% of the budget. For every 2 pesos given to the military, only 1 peso is allotted to health. Then third, we have still military commissions trying civilians.
I'd like to differ from that. These military commissions were all dismantled when martial law was lifted. We don't have any military commissions now.
But I recall, General, that the Andia Karagatan case is being tried by the military commission. The case we're handling, the case of Mila Aguilar, is being tried by the military commission.
That is true, but those are the residual cases, because then, as a matter of procedure, when the evidence have already been introduced, and then you will now transfer the case to another forum, you will have certain difficulties like jeopardy and other things that come in. This is compelled by the legal situation. But this is not something which indicates the continuation of the constitution of military tribunal.
Doris, do you want to comment on that? Yeah?
When the military commissions, I think, got abolished, I was directly affected by that because our case was transferred from the military commission to a civilian court. But what happened there was it became very visible at the time that even the civilian courts were controlled, in fact, by the military. I know that for a fact because when we were tried, we actually entered into plea bargaining with the state, prosecution in the person of General Maya, I think your predecessor, and the others who asked us to plead guilty and get a light sentence, which we did. But we got 4 months, most of us, and I overstayed by 4 years. So they just filed additional charges, and it was still, I don't know, the impotency of the judicial system was very evident then, but I hope it has changed.
While Doris is at it, here's a phone-in question from Doris. How can you talk about being persecuted when you admitted as a member of being a member of the Light of Fire movement, and you're responsible for the injuries and the deaths of some people?
I did admit to doing that. It's the first time I said it on TV, by the way. And no, and I think I have overserved, and I have taken the consequences for what I've done. I don't want to have to justify what I did, but I believed then, and I do still believe now, that I did that to serve my country the best way I knew how.
Okay.
Randy, I'd like to go back to that question of the extended role of the military. Do you agree with the statement of the general that right now that's all over and the military is starting out anew? something to that effect.
I think that the practice that that was followed during the Marcos regime has left very clear traces, no, in our civilian and corporate life, so that you still find, I understand, some holdover military personnel in some corporations of government, which has caused some controversy. This is precisely what I meant when I said that the dangerous tendencies that we should guard against in our society are exemplified by functions other than military that are being assumed by military personnel. This is a practice that we see in countries like Thailand and Indonesia, where the military has promulgated the doctrine of dual function, meaning that it is not see itself being linked to military functions, but considers itself not only legally, but also morally and historically entitled to play socio-political functions. And that includes participating and sitting in corporate boards, educational boards, economic boards, and even, in the case of Indonesia, in religious institutions.
Rene, what has the CONCOM done to limit the spheres of influence and the power of the military?
Lauren, before we leave that topic of the professor here, I think that the control here comes. And when I say control, it's the control of the commander-in-chief in setting the policies of the roles of the military. I don't know in Indonesia and in Thailand, which you have cited as examples, but in the Philippines, I would say that the participation of officers in non-military roles is dictated by policy, and this is because these military people are not only military men, but also learn in the lines to which they have been detailed. They are there not to function as military, but as experts, you may call them, along that line.
Learned in the educated class.
Well, I think they should leave the military. That is the case. If they want to practice their expertise and training.
There is such a tendency, but I was saying that much of that depends upon national policy.
Is it national policy, or of course the CONCOM would have a big hand in this?
To limit the influence of the military, Loren, we are suggesting that for the creation or revival of the commission appointments, now the president can appoint military officers only with the concurrence and consent of the commission appointments. You know, in the 1973 Constitution, the commission on appointments was non-existent. It's only the president who can appoint, but we are reviving these commission appointments, which was a body which was existing during the 1935 Constitution. Second, we are enriching the Bill of Rights. Now, solitary confinements are not allowed, torture is not allowed, and the government is obliged to compensate and rehabilitate the victims of torture, and including their families. And thirdly, resolutions were filed to reorient the role of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, meaning that it is now the task of the Armed Forces of the Philippines to protect the rights of the people, to guarantee the independence and territorial integrity of our country.
Okay, we shall be talking more about the reorientation of the role of the military in the present dispensation after we take a short break. We'll be right back.
On August 17, 1934, Constitutional Delegate Amancio Aguilar for Masbate died of cerebral hemorrhage while conversing with fellow delegates on the floor. It is not known whether he was then engaged in an argument for or against the unicameral and the bicameral forms of government.
Before we took a break, Rene Sarmiento from the CONCOM mentioned about the reorientation of the role of the military. Would you like to elaborate more on that, Rene?
Well, before, the military, during martial law, was used by Marcos to perpetuate himself in power. Now, we believe that the AFP should be a guardian of people's rights. It should protect our rights. It should not be an instrument of oppression. That is why a resolution was filed with the CONCOM for the purpose of reorienting the role of the armed forces of the Philippines.
Talking about instruments of oppression, I understand that you filed a resolution to abolish the CHDF, and the CHDF, if I may say so, has been quite notorious for the fact that they say that it is an instrument of oppression, of abuses, and for this reason you have filed that resolution.
I'll agree with you, Loren. Commissioner Noliedo and I filed a resolution with the COMCOM for the disbandment of the CHDF and paramilitary forces. Even General Ramos, in one of his public statements, said that CHDFs erode national reconciliation.
On the contrary, I suppose that General Ramos was justifying the existence of CHDF by saying that it was necessary to support the 270,000 military, that it wasn't enough to protect the populace.
I guess you can relate that to even the campaign promise of the president, promising to disband the CHDF. So,
what's the score really?
On this, yeah?
Well, the Committee on General Provisions approved a resolution. So hopefully it will be approved by the body, so that it will be part of our constitution that there will be no more paramilitary forces in our country.
Our spokesman from the military perhaps would like to say something.
I'd like to correct you there. I'm not the spokesman. I'm from the military. I'm here in my capacity as a military man, Judge Advocate General, and I was asked to pitch it also for the Chief of Staff. But the matter of the paramilitary forces, the CHDF, the position of the Chief of Staff anti-military has been amply aired in the Commission. If I follow them, if I follow the position correctly, it is not exactly a total abolition, but a reorientation to the fundamental role that they were supposed to play. You see, the Civilian Home Defense Force was conceived as something like the village protector. It should be drawn, its membership should be drawn from the members in a village where they have their families and their properties to take care of. And they will secure the village from outside intruders.
What went wrong then? Why this notoriety?
Well, things developed and got out of hand during the Marcos regime, and you know what happened after that.
I think most CHDF members then were known as goons.
And yes, parang their qualification was the more intimidating they are to the public, the better they are. Yes, Randy.
I think Randy has something
no,
about that.
But first of all, if it's individual violations by etc., then that should not probably stigmatize the whole organization. But the point is, and it was being stressed, is that there is need for this. Confined to its fundamental role of being a village protector of their own hearth and their properties, then that should be it. But they should be controlled, and the control should be there, and the training should be there, so that to prevent them. I'm talking of the fundamental and the initial, the motivations, the thought that went into the creation of the CHDF.
Okay, Randy.
I think that the question of the CHDF cannot be divorced from the necessity to disband the private armies of the warlords. Because in many places of the country, the CHDFs are also the members of the private armies of the warlords. And if you're looking for an element that really furnishes the greatest destabilizing influence in our present society, it is the continuing existence of private armies and of CHDFs in the countryside.
But if they will be disbanded by the Constitution, by the CONCOM, won't these CHDF members then lose their jobs and just be relegated to doing being private armies of these political warlords then?
Well, that's why it is necessary.
That's what they are now, but they'll be relegated to doing just that if they are abolished.
I suppose that's what we have the army for and the police.
Mm-hmm.
To go after lawless elements. These are lawless elements.
Okay, there's another phone-in question here from Attorney Guevara, and it's addressed to General Soriano. Why is it that despite the pronouncements of President Aquino regarding reconciliation, The military seems to be countermanding said policy by deploying additional soldiers in Cagayan, Samar, Negros, and similar places.
I don't know if that's called countermanding, but the position which has been declared with the Commander-in-Chief is that the military takes what we call an active defense. The augmentation of troops in the areas does not necessarily mean a countermanding.
This is another question from, this is an interesting question from Corina Lopa. It's addressed again to the General.
Anyway.
It said, as reported today in the midday, there's an apparent split within the Reform AFP, you know, one faction with the RAM MND and one faction with RAM AFP. You know, her question is, if this is true, will this mean that the RAM AFP will be supporting President Aquino and the RAM MND will be supporting Minister Enrile?
The key to that is in the first clause of his sentence. If this is true, I say it's not true.
General Soriano, isang maikling tanong lang, no? From George So, sino ba talaga ang pinapanigan ni Minister Enrile? Just a brief answer to that, brief question, please.
Pinapanigan. He's for the government and for the people. I think he has made definite pronouncement as to this.
Okay, Doris?
I was beginning to say I'm like more inclined to think, especially over the past couple of weeks, that the good minister is trying to strengthen his own position instead of strengthening the whole government. At the rate he's been appearing on talk shows and made himself available to the media, it's like he's on a media blitz of sorts. Or
Doris, that's your perception.
That's my personal perception.
May I just comment on the troop movements? I think this is, again, one reality that erodes civilian supremacy over the military. The government has fielded troops in Luzon, Mindanao, and the Visayas. Then another thing, another reality that is eroding civilian supremacy over the military. President Aquino ordered the release of all political prisoners. But according to task force detainees, over 300 political prisoners are still detained in various detention centers.
I think you would remember that the President has constituted a political detainees committee headed by Justice Minister Gonzales, and I am a member from the military. We are now going over this because there's a difficulty in actually defining what is a political detainee as distinguished from one who is detained for violation of common crimes. We are now in that aspect, and this after sifting this through and coming up with an accepted definition, then the release will follow. There is no countermanding.
May I ask the General a question?
Okay,
has the Commission on Human Rights gotten any headway?
You're asking me now as a member of the Commission on Human Rights? Yes, we have, but it is silently and effectively and efficiently doing that, always bearing in mind the fact that our actuation should adhere strictly to the requirements of due process.
Because actually what I hear is otherwise. They say the subpoenas served to the soldiers are always answered with the soldiers are out on AWOL.
No. We have
officers.
To tell you the truth, we haven't subpoenaed any soldier.
So you may have been getting the wrong information?
This is something which I think was erroneously printed. The other day they said that the Human Rights Committee issued a subpoena for Colonel Aguinaldo, which is not true. They were alluding that to a statement made by Professor Yorak. I would wish he was here. But she corrected that. She was saying that we're considering, but we haven't issued. I mean, the committee has not issued.
You know, Butch, as much as possible, we'd like to answer all these phone-in questions. We would like to go back to the questions. Here's for Rene Sarmiento. As indicated by recent events, the military has the capability to launch a coup. Shouldn't we propose a mechanism to deter such eventuality in the Constitution, Rene?
Well, there is one resolution that was filed with the CONCOM that is for the dissolution of the AFP and the formation of a citizens' army. That's one mechanism to prevent coup. Then,
how do you distinguish the citizens' army from the CHDF?
Yeah, isn't that also a...
Totally different bodies. Citizens' army different from CHDF.
Not the param. Would the citizens' army be like the Israeli army, where the citizens are called in times of only crisis?
Yes. Bayan and Minister Pimentel are proposing the creation of the Citizens Army and for its inclusion in the Constitution.
So that would mean trimming down of the...
Trimming down, yes, yes. And then, well, to prevent possible coup, possibly could reduce the budget of the military. We have 11 billion pesos as budget of the military. And then we could reduce the number of the military. We have 270,000 military personnel. And that is too much. In 1972, we have only about 60,000.
We have a question here for Randy David.
Randy, I think I'd like to react to what
to
Rene
address
said.
the question of the coup, because while a substantial reduction of the military budget would go a long way in preventing a coup d'etat, I don't think its influence is decisive. I believe that, I wanted to say two things. Number one, I think that the most decisive thing that we can do to prevent a coup is to strengthen civilian political institutions.
And how is this done?
And this is done by projecting the image of a decisive civilian government in all areas, and the image that the people in their organizations are ready to defend the government. Secondly, the other thing that I wanted to say is that while the military may be objectively capable of mounting a coup, I think that the entire military establishment would have to be insane to attempt a coup d'etat at this point in time. And I know pretty well that there are good minds in the military. Everywhere.
Are you trying to cite the military?
No, I'm simply citing an objective fact.
Okay.
Everywhere in the third world, especially in Central and Latin America, the military establishment has been on the defensive and on the retreat, so that in countries like Argentina, they have been voluntarily handing power back to the civilians simply because they cannot solve the economic crisis of their countries. So why would they want to seize power now and confront all the problems that Ms. Aquino is trying to sort out?
We have a question here for you, Randy, from Efraim Mercado. Politicians and revolutionaries are of the same kind. They exploit the masses. Can you comment on this?
I don't think that is true. I think that revolutionaries come from the masses. They wish to organize the masses so that the masses may be empowered to defend themselves. Politicians, I believe, are career people who exploit the masses and project themselves at the expense of the masses. I'm not saying that all politicians are that, but people who make a career out of running for positions and angling for positions perpetually, rather than thinking of the interests of the people.
Here's another question from Ruben de la Cruz, addressed to Doris here. And he asks, if there were no Enrile and Ramos, where would this present government be?
Still here, I think. I think eventually, yes, it may have taken a little longer, but we would still be, I mean, they would still be here, I think.
The other half of his question.
Excuse me, before we go on, I think we'll have to take a break.
Okay.
We'll be back with more phone-in questions after this. We're back on Street Pulse, and would like to accommodate as much as possible all the phone-in questions. Here's a question from General Soriano. Can you comment on the fact that 3 military officers who are presently involved in the Philippine Coconut Authority have not yet left their office? Where are these 3 officers?
I think that from what I read in the papers, their stay there was requested by the manager of the Philippine Coconut Administration, but not for long. I think to a transitory period.
And what's a follow-up to that? Considering the July 4 incident under the military, when the military dispersed the demonstrators at the U.S. Embassy, can you truly say that the civilian authority is supreme over the military? That's from Paul Reyes. General Soriano.
I don't see the connection.
Dispersal of the demonstrators.
The dispersal of the demonstrators arose from the fact that they were already violating the law. And the peace officers there could not just let that pass by. They're supposed to enforce the law.
I was there, General, and I don't think that the demonstrators were violating the law.
Well, that is what I say. Of course, I read that from the papers, and That's my explanation of how it existed.
Would you then say then, Randy, that they did not have to be dispersed that way?
Yes, I think that it was uncalled for. The dispersal and the shooting of the demonstrators was certainly uncalled for.
Here's another question addressed to Randy. How can you, as a sociologist, how can we change, what do you say about changing the orientation of the military from fighting Filipinos into protecting them against foreign invasion and harassment?
Well, I agree entirely with Executive Secretary Joker Arroyo that there is a need to re-educate some segments of the military and establish once again the close linkages between the military and the Filipino people because they have been alienated from our people.
Another question addressed to Doris. Ano dapat ang gawin ng gobyerno sa panggugulo ni Tolentino?
If I really had a choice, I'd put him against the wall and, no, I think I'd pursue the same...
And what?
And shoot them. No, I think I'd pursue the same, what the government is doing now. In fact, go on and charge them with what should be, what they should be charged with and not let them go scot-free because they actually defied openly the government and they should take the consequences as we did when we tried to defy the government then.
I think the government should file rebellion charges against Tolentino et al.
Do you agree, General Soriano?
That's a decision that the ruling civilian authority would make. And from the military point of view, whatever the military says, the civilian says, we obey.
As usual, we don't have enough time. I would like to acknowledge on the questions of Honorato Talorong, Lydia Santos, and Melvin Mercado. The questions, I'm sorry, you weren't able to ask. And Butch?
Yeah, thank you to Rebecca Baluyot, Mr. Cruz, Private Ramos, Mr. Custodio, and Eli Bautista, Orly Daluz, Kaakbay Chairman, Vicente Ugsemer, and yeah, that's about all of that.
So at this point, we'd like to thank our guests, Doris Bafri, Randolph David, General Samuel Soriano, and Rene Sarmiento for having joined us on Street Pulse. Butch?
Yeah, we invite you to be with us again next Friday, 10 p.m. here at RTN 9. So in behalf of Loren and the production staff, a very pleasant good night to you all.
We'll see you then on Church and State Relations next week on Street Pulse. Good night.